So when you're trying to get more patients to choose your office to actually come and visit you among all the other providers, a very overlooked factor that is critical for creating attraction between you, your office, and the patient is the patient's story and your story. So, what I mean by story is that you, me, your patients, we don't have the time, the capacity, the resources to try all the different options when it comes to whenever we're making a choice. So, let's say you're choosing types of watches, right? You don't have the resources to try on every single watch, to wear it around for a year to see how people react to it and how it feels and how accurate it is and all this stuff. Or if you're choosing from a types of cereal, you probably don't want to go out and buy all these different things. If you're choosing a type of car and so on and so forth. And similarly, your patients don't have the capacity to have a consultation with all their different options to go in and actually experience the treatment, right? It's just not possible. So with this limited resource, what we do instead, with this limited knowledge, what we do instead is we look at each option, and each option does one of three things. It either tells a story that aligns with what the patient wants to hear, it tells a story that detracts or doesn't align with what the patient wants to hear, or it tells a story, or it doesn't tell a story at all. All right. So when you create a story that aligns, so what that means is first we start with the worldview of the people you want to attract. The worldview meaning what are their beliefs, right? So if you think of your group of ideal patients, they're typically your ideal patients because they behave similarly. And behavior is, if you go down the chain of events from cognitive science, its behavior is pretty much determined by beliefs. So if we can group people by similar beliefs, they will behave similarly, and you probably enjoy those ideal patients because of their behaviors. So when we group by similar beliefs, the worldview, aka beliefs, is going to determine whether a story is in alignment or out of alignment. So take, for example, a sports car. Let's say you are a parent who has a child and now they're ready to get a car, and you have a worldview that a car is about safety, it's about responsibility, it's about that kind of stuff. And then let's say there's another parent whose belief is that a car is about status, it's about fitting in and being trendy, it's about showing financial status. Those two different worldviews are going to look at the same story of that sports car, and it's going to be out of alignment or in alignment. So the story the sports car tells, if the company designed it to be that way, is that this is a sports car that is all about, excess horsepower. We have more than you need. It costs more than it should. Then you should pay for a car, so you can tell other people how much you spent in excess because you have those financial resources. Whereas maybe a minivan would be telling the story of this is all about safety. It's about comfort. It's about accessibility and all these things, right? The companies aren't going to be looking at the sports car and saying, hey, this is the most powerful, but it's also the safest. And if we try to incorporate all these different storytelling elements, then the product itself gets confusing. So the most effective companies are leaning into one angle and trying to attract a crowd who wants that one angle versus trying to attract in many different angles. So back to the worldview, two different parents, two different worldviews. They see that sports car, which is telling the story about excess, about speed, about power, freedom. For the parent that cares about safety and responsibility, it's going to be out of alignment, and it's going to be way more in alignment with the parent who cares about status and all that stuff. All right. So the parents themselves don't know the details of the different car options. They don't know, or they don't really care about how much horsepower it has. They don't care about the actual safety features. They're not going into the research and looking into all the different stuff. What they want to hear is the story that the company tells them. And people insist that companies tell us stories because, again, we don't have the capacity to actually know the details. So if a company is saying that, hey, this car is the safest, it's met all these standards, it tells us all these information to support that story, then if it's in alignment with that worldview you want to attract more of, you get attraction. And another caveat here is that it's rarely effective if a company is going out there and saying, we are this story, this is our story, this is what we're about. Rather, like a good joke, the people who are receiving on the receiving end of that story should come to the punchline themselves, and that's through experiencing the different touch points that come before they're able to make the decision. So in your case, that might be patients' touch points, meaning moments where people can interact with your practice, your brand, without actually having to work with you. Or that's not true. Moments where they interact with you throughout the process, but we're talking about touch points before they choose to work with you. Those touch points are going to create the story. The actual thing that happens when they choose you is also part of the story, and what happens afterwards is also part of the story. So we have to make sure we keep consistency and we're actually delivering on our promise, because we can tell a fake story, bring people, they realize we were lying, and that's going to ruin everything. That's going to ruin your brand, that's going to ruin trust, and you're probably going to go out of business fast. But the point is that the touch points that come before your website, your logo, your all these different things, like how people, how they're greeted when they call in for the office to ask questions. All these different things are sending narrative signals about what the story of your office might be. So if someone calls in, oh, this is an office that lends itself towards being premium. They are probably going the extra mile. If I go here, they're probably going to treat me with the utmost customer service, right? That is one story. They can call another office and say, hey, this office tells a story that it is cost effective. It's if you want a decent job for a decent amount of money, that's a story. The mistake is trying to tell a story that appeals to everyone or to not tell a story at all. And they're kind of similar. When you don't tell a story at all, you're not choosing to say that we are for something. You're the car company that is trying to appeal to everyone, kind of like, I don't know, Volkswagen. I don't know cars too well, but there is no angle that they're leaning into. You're not telling a story. We don't know what you're about. The other mistake is to try to appeal to everyone, which is to say that, hey, we are this, we are that, we are safety, we are speed, we are everything. And that also doesn't work as well. Because when you try to appeal to everyone, what you end up doing is you end up becoming average. But that's a whole another point. I've made a lot of videos about that. The point is, you tell a story, and the people whose worldviews align with that story are the ones who are going to be attracted. So first, you have to tell a good story. You have to create the narrative touch points so that the people themselves uncover that story. They're the ones that are going to be telling themselves a story. It's not you saying, hey, we are the most cost effective, right? The people will be the judge of that, and they judge that through your touch points. And so tell a good story. And once you do tell a good story, realize that it's going to attract the type of person that is going to be attracted to that type of story. All right. That is really the essence of messaging, that marketing word of like messaging your patients. So what are their, who first identify who are the group of people that you want to attract, because that's going to be the basis for everything. If you're trying to attract people who want a more premium experience, who want to spend more money, who want to go to an office and not feel like you are cutting costs in delivering or providing service because you're working with insurance or whatever, yet they, if you want to attract those people, yet all the signals in your office, in your practice, when they come and see or look online are telling a completely different story, then you have a mismatch. Your practice is sending out a story that is very different than the story that you want to be telling to attract this worldview. All right, so tell a story, Make sure it's in alignment though. All right. So that's it for stories. Hope you found this video valuable, and see you guys in the next one.